someone in Egypt discussing this conversion of the Khazars. So in the Cairo Geniza, there is a letter about that from the Middle Ages. So anyway, this Koestler, Arthur Koestler, he wrote a book, I forget what it was called, claiming, I guess it was the 13th tribe, I think that's what he called it, claiming that the Jews were really that's why they had this huge population in Russia, they were Khazars. There's some Khazar blood, obviously, among Jews, which is a kind of Turkish, Russo-Turkish people of the steppes. There's obviously perhaps some of that blood. The Arabs want to say it's all, that's all who the Jews are, so they should go back to Russia, and so on. But I don't think that that's the majority, or even close to the majority. You know, I think that I don't want to be a racist, but the racial stereotypes and different things, DNA would do a lot of verifying different things. But I think you'll find that there's a pretty deep consistency, regardless of the different types that have emerged. Yemeni Jews, you know, there's Jewish tribes in Nigeria. You know, there's, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you Ethiopia and so on, where all these people got to. Very, very persistent situation. And the DNA often holds up. Many of them carry priestly markers from the Second Temple period. The ones in Nigeria, it turned out, were carrying the priestly marker, even though they're totally black now. You say, well, how come? Well, once you start intermarrying with the local people, and then that takes over, that strain becomes the dominant strain, so basically you look like the people you're living with. Same with Yemen, same in many other places. But if you go deeper down into the DNA structure, you find these markers. This is a very, very odd thing. You know. So again, I'm not trying to give racial theory here, but I'm just trying to show you that you know, these things are not just made up. Like there may be some, but a lot of it is verifiable. Yeah.
How far back can they go genetically?
I'm not a DNA expert, but I think that the African situation probably goes back to the destruction of the first temple situation. When tribes went down into Egypt, different groups went down into Egypt. We know there was a Jewish garrison in southern Egypt. At Elephantine it was called, the border with the Sudan. There was a temple there. That's how that so-called treasured ended up in Ethiopia, the Holy of Holies or whatever, you know, Steven Spielberg, what's that movie? The Ark of the Covenant supposedly is in this town in Ethiopia. Yeah, the traditions went down there, whether they have a copy or the Ark of the Covenant from the temple in Egypt or whatever that is down there, something got down there or was copied or whatever. And of course, there are all the traditions of Solomon and Sheba, though she was a Southern Arabian queen, not an Ethiopian queen. But anyway, then it probably went down further. There's, I haven't done there have been some really good programs on the Discovery Channel, in other words, going down into Kenya, different forts that were built there, and then down into Nigeria. I don't think it was after the Roman conquest as much as maybe earlier that these people started going down into those areas. I know, for instance, that the tradition of the Jews of Cochin, which is on the western shore of India in the Malabar coast, where all of the ginger comes from. All the ginger that you see in the Japanese restaurants and so on all comes from the Malabar coast and so on. They were in the spice trade, and they definitely have traditions of the time of the uprising against Rome. And you know, the great Jewish families I told you about in Egypt, Philo of Alexandria, who Eusebius knows very, very well, and all his works influenced Paul and so on. And he speaks about his own mission to Gaius, Caligula, stop Caligula from putting a bust of himself in the temple. Josephus writes about that. The family of Philo in Alexandria were called the Alabarchs of Alexandria. And they were rich because they dominated the Red Sea trade. They dominated the Red Sea trade that went all the way to India. So there was already going on back in Roman times with Jewish families in Alexandria. And Philo's family is, one of Philo's nephews was Titus's military adjutant in the siege of the temple and the destruction of the temple. His name was Tiberius Alexander. His father was called Alexander. He was Philo's brother. So these are all interesting things. So that community in India goes way back to probably, certainly the destruction of the Second Temple period and so on. And so talking about how far back, again, these are all very interesting studies to pursue. I only have one lifetime, so I don't need to do some of them. Going back to the Eastern European Pale of Settlement. Why was it called a pale? I don't think anyone ever knows. I don't know when it started to be called a pale. This area of no man's land in between the West and Russia, let us say. The Russian place was pretty well established at the time of, 1600s. They were, Kiev and these places were already resisting Mongols and Tartars and German knights and so on and so forth. You know, the Teutonic knights that Hitler thought he was imitating would already fought this great Russian hero. They made a movie about Alexander Nevsky in the 17th century. So they were already, so it was somewhere squeezed in between those areas that this thing developed. I think it comes from the word Hebrew to work. And in fact, in the Zionist thing, the parties were all called Peolei, Workers' Party, the Peolei Zion, the Workers of Zion. I think this comes from this, where they were allowed to work. I think that's where the word pale comes from, the Hebrew word pa'al, to work, to act, to do. And I'm sure that that's where it comes from. We now say pale, and nobody knows where it's from, but I think it comes from that. Okay, so I want to just, before the break here, just read quickly. I want to just look at this one excerpt that we have here, not from Mendelssohn, but I want to look at this fellow, I hope I have, this fellow, Solomon Maimon. He gives a good picture of what it was like to come west as a kind of Schutz Judah. I told you that Mendelssohn was a Schutz Judah, that is a permitted Jew, who came west to be a tutor of some rich, I think, Berlin families